welcome to the NdB Sunday Show. With me, Chris Steyn and US intelligence analyst, Colonel Chris Wyatt. Welcome, Chris.
Well, yes, thank you, Chris. Welcome to you as well. It's your program, but it's good to see you again. How are things?
I'm fine, thank you. And that side?
Well, it's a little crazy on this side. Donald Trump, everyone in South Africa seems to think that he's obsessed with South Africa. And I keep telling them, no, he's not. It's really not something that gets much of his attention. He's much more obsessed with Greenland, you might have noticed this week.
Well, Iran, what is your take on those joint military exercises?
Well, it's evidence that the African National Congress, despite its public pronouncements, despite its claims that it's a neutral actor, that South Africa's foreign policy is not aligned with anyone, it's poppycock. It's absolute balderdash. It's always been balderdash. It was pretty obvious for anybody who was paying attention when South Africa joined 30 plus other countries in Africa. They refused to condemn Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. And they said, well, we're neutral. We're not getting involved. And then we see Cyril Ramaphosa go on this fake peacemaking mission in which he embarrassed himself and the officials who went with him, violated diplomatic norms by bringing crew-served weapons and unauthorized, unapproved people on a diplomatic flight, landing in Poland and then trying to turn it into a racial issue. Oh, they're just racial. They won't let us in the country. No, when you have a diplomatic flight, you must declare all personnel. You must declare all weapons. If they let you bring weapons, you don't bring in crate loads of weapons and a security force without approval of the host nation. And the Poles rightly forced them to stand on a plane. So look, what's going on is just a bit crazy. South Africa has, ANC, I should say, has proven that its friends are in Havana, Beijing, Moscow, Caracas, and places like that, Tehran, not in London or Paris or Tokyo or Canberra or Washington or Ottawa. It doesn't want to have friends in the West, but it loves to take the handouts from the West and try to play this guilt game with the West about give us just energy transition money or give us this, give us that. The current imbroglio where the situation is at really started with South Africa illegitimately, the ANC illegitimately complaining about the U.S. being aggressive towards South Africa when expropriation without compensation was signed last year. It had actually been signed December 2024, but Ramaphosa made a big show signing it at Davos. But all the U.S. did was stop giving free money away. The South African government has proven its friends are in Tehran. And what do I make of this exercise? This is a massive own goal. Even the Europeans look at this going, what are you doing? Look, we get China and Russia. You already did the exercise twice with them. But why are you inviting Iran in the midst of of what's going on in Iran? Those ships should have turned back. And it's not just the Iranian Navy, Chris. This is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. This is a designated terrorist group. So South Africa's government is hosting a terror group on its own shores at its own naval facility. This is beyond the pale. And people may not like that, but that's reality. This is a group that sponsors terrorism and participates in terrorist activities around the world. Not the Iranian Navy, but the Revolutionary Guard. And that's what we're talking about here. So my take on this is that it was intentional. Excuse me. My take on this is it was intentional. That was the goal. That it was intended, or these people, as Neil once said, are really that stupid. I can't believe they're that stupid. No, is anybody that stupid to see the optics of this? Whether you like the United States or not, you've jeopardized over $20 billion of two-way trade where you have a $7 billion surplus and you have benefication of your goods. You've put that on the rocky shoals and sacrificed that for what? And you keep telling people that things about the ICJ just simply aren't true. Listen, it seems to me that the actions from the outside of the African National Congress seem to be intended to appease or please their overlords in Tehran. What's the purpose of the ICJ case? By the way, the Gambia's case against Myanmar for genocide, that case, which is the historic first ever case of one country taking another country to the ICJ for genocide, the ANC still hasn't joined it. Yet the UK, Germany, and several other countries, Canada, have joined that as friends of the court with amicus briefs. They are part of the case now, joining the Gambia. But the ANC is so concerned about genocide, except when it comes to Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. The hypocrisy is beyond the pale. And it speaks to one thing. The ANC is in bed with the mullahs in Tehran. And you know what? South Africa's sovereign state. That's their choice. They can do what they want. But to think the United States is going to sit back while a state sponsor of terrorism gets away with the nonsense they're getting away with, and while ships go to South Africa, and then we see this mealy-mouthed back and forth, they're part of the exercise, they're not part of the exercise, we're a sovereign state, this is our business, they're going, they're not going. Look, there's a real disconnect in the African National Congress government. And I believe, in part, This is still the fracture inside the ANC that we saw in July of 2021 when the internal ANC insurrection unfolded in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng. It's still playing out. This party is not united inside the government, let alone in the country.
Chris, how far do you think the ANC would go to support Iran?
Let me take another sip of my beverage here. Gosh, how far will they go? Well, I don't know. There's lots of supposition, lots of allegations of what they'll do, but it seems it doesn't matter what the public perception is, or maybe that's the goal. Maybe they want the people who back them or their supporters to believe that they do back Iran. I don't know. Would they engage in military operations? Probably not. I mean, the South African military is in such a dilapidated state that it really couldn't accomplish much of anything. They'd have a hard time stopping the tuna boats off of the coast of Mozambique, let alone get involved in combat. So I don't think they'll do that. I don't think they'll send mercenaries to Iran to fight, in the streets. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what will continue to happen is that the African National Congress will publicly support anything that the Iranians want in the United Nations, and they'll call for action in the Security Council. It's interesting that the South African government, it's the actions they don't take, I think, are more important than the ones they do take. The South African government and President Ramaphosa screamed up and down, we demand an immediate Security Council meeting for the breaking of the rules-based international order, when the United States extradited Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela, an illegitimate president sitting in an illegitimate seat, having stolen 2 consecutive elections in a row. There was an extradition order for him that went back to 2020, and the Venezuelan government wouldn't comply with it. Now, right or wrong, I'm not here to debate that, but I am here to say that what the U.S. did was not a kidnapping. It was an extradition of a wanted accused felon, and that's what we have. So the South African government was very vocal and adamant. Oh, look at this. This is wrong. Where is the South African government when it comes to asking for an urgent Security Council meeting on the slaughter of thousands, possibly tens of thousands of peaceful protesters on the streets of Iran as the government was in jeopardy? They're nowhere to be found. The South African government has lodged no complaint with the Security Council. The South African government has raised no issue with the international community. The South African government has said nothing about the rules-based international order. Apparently, slaughtering people in the streets of your country is a domestic issue that is of none of our concern. At least that's the approach the South African government has taken. So how far will they go? They'll go far enough to look the other way at the innocents being slaughtered on the streets of Tehran, Bandar Abbas, and all the other cities across Iran.
Over to its relationship with China, the US has accused a South African Flight Academy of supporting the Chinese military with NATO expertise.
Yes, they have. And in fact, Chris, I've been reporting on this for over a year. Last year, when the expropriation without compensation order was signed, and then President Trump in early February signed an executive order which ceased financial aid to third parties in South Africa. By the way, most of that money went to non-government organizations, not to the government of South Africa. People need to understand that. So it didn't really punish the government of South Africa. It hurt people in South Africa, which is unfortunate, especially those with HIV. But when that happened, President Trump also allowed for the possibility of refugees coming over. But excuse me. Oh, sorry about that. A little under the weather this morning. So when that happened, Chris, I lost my spot. Where are we at? What was the question? Sorry.
We're talking about that Flight Academy.
Oh, Flight Academy, yeah. So when President Trump signed that executive order, the South African government was very vocal and adamant about, whoa, what are they doing? Why are they attacking us? This is aggressive. We didn't do anything. To which I produced several slides of just about 24 egregious offenses that South Africa has committed against the United States or allowed to occur. And tucked in amongst that list of things on my slides that I've presented repeatedly over the past year is a mention of how the Flying Academy of South Africa had been training People's Liberation Army pilots to NATO standards, using U.S. and former NATO pilots to train them to kill U.S. pilots. Now, this is an egregious offense that needs attention. The South African government ignored it, did nothing about it when our diplomats addressed it to them. Another reason. Now, these are things that play out behind the scenes that aren't in public. So the public's like, what have we done? Well, you've done an awful lot that's harmed the U.S., its national interests, its national security, and its friends, partners, and allies. And this is one of those things. The Test Flying Academy was founded by the ANC government-sponsored, founded organization. I don't know its current status, whether it's a parastatal or it's a private organization, but they founded it. And it's training Chinese People's Liberation Army. Why? There are plenty of pilots around the world that could use flight training beyond this. And this is something I've mentioned for over a year. Now what's happened is that we find out that some time ago, apparently U.S. interdicted flights or mission control simulators that are using U.S.-based software, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, not according to Chris Wyatt, not according to Chris Steyn, not according to us, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. And they've had these for some time now. They caught them in Singapore. Now, here's a couple things that the South African government should take note of. Number one, when you say Trump just doesn't understand about expropriation. But the U.S. government under the Biden administration, intelligence community, discovered that these trainers were being shipped to China, interdicted them, and seized them with the cooperation of Singapore authorities. What does that tell you? That tells you that it's a pretty good intelligence apparatus, number one. Number two, it also tells you that this is not something that's simply a U.S. issue. The Singapore authorities would never have allowed U.S. government to seize that stuff without legitimate basis for it. Now, in their defense, the Test Flying Academy of South Africa has issued a statement with an internal report that they claim they did and released last year internally, but now they're releasing it public off their website, saying that they went through this and all it was Windows off-the-shelf technology. To which my answer is I've offered them an opportunity to come on my program. It's a weekend, so I don't know if they haven't had a chance to review it yet. So I'll give them a fair chance and we'll listen to what they have to say, and maybe they're correct. But I don't know. A press release is not adequate to answer this question. Because my first question on this, Chris, is really, so you're shipping to China, the country in the world now that produces the most Windows-based computers, makes them in China. So you're shipping PCs from South Africa to China. All they have on this Windows 11. Seriously? Give me a break. I mean, I'm not going to buy that for a second. I need to hear more here because the U.S. government didn't do this under Trump. They did this under Biden. These were intercepted in 2024 before Biden left office. And he was in office for 3 months before Trump took over. And only now they're releasing this publicly. We held this back so as not to embarrass the South African government during the G20. And instead, we get assaulted and our president's ridiculed by President Ramaphosa. And this is another example how the U.S. has been very restrained when it comes to this relationship with South Africa. This is something that could have broke when Biden was still president. This is something that could have broke anytime last year after Ramaphosa came at the White House. Donald Trump could have embarrassed Cyril Ramaphosa by saying, what about this? We've intercepted this stuff. And they could have shown photographs of the equipment and screenshots. They didn't do any of that. They didn't do any of that. Frankly, Chris, I'm sick and tired of the belly aching about how the United States aggressed towards South Africa when the restraint has been beyond the pale. The things that the government of South Africa has done that I know about, and I'm no longer in the intelligence committee. I'm just a person that's a researcher and independent journalist. The things that I know about because I'm objective will actually follow the lead that the South African public is ignoring and the political actions in South Africa are denying would make the hair on the back of your neck crawl. If we knew what the intelligence community knew, there's a lot more here than anyone's talking about. And quite frankly, the South African government is doing South Africans no favor. They're harming farmers. They're harming automobile manufacturers. They're harming South Africans. And this is, I'm sorry, I'm going to use the word reprehensible. It's unfortunate. You don't have to like Washington, but when you do things against its interest, don't expect there won't be consequences. And there are probably more consequences coming soon.
Now, Chris, if you were president of South Africa, would you move to repair your relationship with the US or would you dig in your heels?
Well, it depends. If I suddenly became the president of South Africa today, I would allow the exercise to continue. I mean, there's no reason to insult the Iranians intentionally, let them finish the exercise, and then let the Chinese and Russians, but that would be the last time we do that. There is no BRICS military agreement. Calling this a BRICS exercise is a joke. There's no such thing as a BRICS military. There's no defense sharing, no defense agreement. There's not even a status force agreement between any of these countries, to my knowledge, where troops can go and train as such. Maybe they've made an ad hoc one for this exercise. For my first step would be to let that go. My next step would be, yes, to repair the damage. I would stop attacking the United States, and I would stop taking public positions that harm its interest. Now, that costs South Africa nothing. To simply stop attacking the United States costs them 0 rand, nothing. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't even hurt you in the eyes of your friends in Moscow or Beijing, unless you're a proxy for them and you're executing their foreign policy. Now, that's a whole different story. We don't know that. But if that's the case, then it does put you in a bind. Because if they're expecting you in Tehran to say and do these things, like file a case against Israel and the ICJ, and you don't do it, you might be in a bind. But if you look at the trade between Russia and South Africa, it's virtually nothing, almost not. It's a rounding error, if that. China and South Africa is significant. It's the largest trading partner, but very little benefication. Most of its raw materials being shipped to China where they process the things, and then they send you back industrial goods, which gives you a serious negative trade balance, which is not something South Africa can afford. Whereas with the U.S. and the European Union, the U.S. anyway, you have a surplus, and you're getting benefication of producing finished goods that really help everybody across the economic ladder in South Africa. So I would stop attacking the U.S. and go from there. And I would appoint an ambassador to the United States, one with some gravitas, one that actually can walk and chew gum at the same time without intentionally insulting the United States in private or in public. I mean, look, I'm not trying to tell this other going to have stuck eggs, and I'm not a fan or I'm not a detractor, but names like Tony Leon or Trevor Manuel come to mind. These are two competent, I mean, they're both getting up there, a little long in the tooth, but both of them are capable, especially Trevor, he's a bit older. But I mean, someone like that would actually take this stuff seriously. I would also designate a trade negotiator. I would send a trade representative to the United States to work on the tariffs and work them down. The South African government has reportedly over and over again said that they have sent a trade representative or trade delegation in the U.S. But where's this trade delegation? They haven't done anything. All these other countries that have negotiated with the U.S. have lowered their tariffs by opening up their markets to U.S. goods. Switzerland, which was very restrictive on what the U.S. could send there, was imposed with a 39% tariff. While the government of South Africa and South Africa's legacy media were crying about how U.S. was aggressive towards South Africa, woe is me, they're attacking South Africa, 30% tariff. While that was going on, Switzerland, a neutral country, a truly neutral country that we've gotten along with centuries, was slapped with a 39% tariff. 39%. And the reason for the tariffs is because these countries are not letting our products and services get in, or they put quotas, or they put excessively high tariffs. It's not fair. And we have allowed ourselves to become a debtor nation by letting the world strip us of our wealth. We hear about reparations, but we've been paying reparations for 40 years to the rest of the world, especially China and Africa, giving them preferential trade access while we get screwed over with our goods and services going in. So instead of seeing Monsanto and John Deere all over Africa and Verizon, you don't see that. You see Chinese companies or European companies all over because our companies can't compete there because of the tariffs and the barriers. And for once, we have a president said enough. So Switzerland sent a delegation, a serious delegation, one of the senior people in their government over, and they negotiated the tariffs down from 39 to 19%. Still excessive in my mind. I think that's a bit much. But when they agree to a deal that gets it down to zero, then we can go to zero. But in the meantime, this is simply the United States, saying, hey, enough is enough.
With America seemingly moving away from a rules-based global order to might is right, could we be hearing a Delta Force helicopter hovering above the Union building sometime soon?
No, I think that's highly unlikely. There's no legitimate basis to do that. I will caution, however, that MTN is involved in 5 anti-terrorism lawsuits in the United States. Last year, they sought to have the cases dismissed, saying there was no merit. None of the courts in America agreed. The cases all continue going forward. And I should note that MTN is in league with Iran Cell in Iran. And Iran Cell is a known funder of terrorists in Afghanistan and in Iraq who killed U.S. service members. This is an issue that will not be taken lightly. My soldiers were killed because of resources funneled there by the Iranians on the behest or with the concurrence or with even the ignorance of the South Africans' major telecom provider, MTN. And who was the chairman of MTN when this was going on? None other than Cyril Ramaphosa. And that his special ambassador to the U.S., which isn't the case, his envoy, Nkabisi Jonas. These are 2 people who are embroiled in this. And I would say that at some point, because Ramaphosa's time as president will be coming to an end, if I were him, I'd be very circumspect about the places I travel around the world in extradition treaties with the United States. And it's not a threat. I'm just saying that if I were him, I would use good judgment. If I were in his shoes, I would make sure that I'm not embroiled in that lawsuit because those lawsuits are not going away, and that's a serious situation. But back to the point, no, there's not going to be SEAL team or Delta team jumping into the Union buildings. And first off, he probably wouldn't be there. He'll be in his palatial mansion, so we'd have to go there. But they're not going to snatch him. I don't think that's going to happen. As far as the rules-based order, I mean, Chris, I got to come back to that because that's comical. The rules-based order. The South African government likes to run around. That's their favorite phrase now. For the past year, it's been sovereignty. We're a sovereign nation. You are. Do what you want. But suffer what you must, the consequence of when you make transgressions that affect other people. We shouldn't just sit here like we've done for 40 years and take it. So the rules-based international order. Is it part of the rules-based international order to allow South African firms to ship banned war material to sanctioned UN-sanctioned warlords in Benghazi? No. But the South African government has allowed that to happen on multiple occasions. Ooh, there's a rules-based international order being ignored. Is it part of the rules-based international order to host a designated terrorist group for a multinational naval exercise? No. Is it part of the rules-based order to recruit mercenaries to fight in illegal war on behalf of Russia in Ukraine? No. These are things the South African government has done or allowed to happen on its watch. Yet it talks about a rules-based international order. And speaking of the rules-based international order, Chris, China, communist China, never mind the human rights abuses. We won't get into that. Let's just talk about that International Court of Justice, the ANC is so fond of talking about. Oh, yes, the ICJ. Let's see. Just a few years ago, the states in the South China Sea took China to the ICJ because the Chinese were claiming thousands of miles from the shoreline that this was their waters, which is ridiculous. That's not the norm. 12 miles is your boundary, or 200 for exclusive economic zone is sometimes recognized by some people, but not thousands of miles away. And they're attacking Filipino fishing boats They're attacking Vietnamese boats. They're attacking others with water cannons, interdicting, ramming these boats in the sea, putting lives in jeopardy. The Chinese are doing this. They've built naval bases and air bases on top of fragile coral atolls in the South China Sea. But the ICJ determined that China's ridiculous historical fantasy of the 9-dash line is poppycock and that they have no jurisdiction there. They must withdraw. That's been several years ago now. That's the rules-based international order. And the Chinese said, futsek, piss off. We don't care what your decision is. And they're still out there interdicting and building bases and disrupting international maritime traffic. That is not part of the rules-based international order. What is this rules-based international order that the South African government has suddenly discovered by talking to some academic at UNISA or at Stellenbosch? It's ridiculous. The South African government doesn't adhere to rules-based order. The Chinese don't adhere to rules-based order, but they expect the United States to adhere to a rules-based order. It's just a catchphrase. Here's the bottom line, Chris. During his writing, the first actual genuine historian documenting history was Thucydides. And on the Peloponnesian War, in part of the Malian dialogue, when he talks about the poor Malians on a little island off the coast of what is Anatolia, Turkey today, people not bothering anybody, but defenseless. They had no military to speak of. They were just there trading with Athens, with others. And the Athenians show up and they bombard them and they surround them and they starve them out and they seek a dialogue. So the Malians seek diplomacy, a rules-based international order. They go to the Athenians and say, but why are you attacking us? We've done nothing to you. You have no grievances against us. We haven't stolen from you. We haven't undermined your trade. We trade freely with you. We haven't harmed you. We haven't allied with your enemies. And the Athenian ambassador says, well, the strong will do what they want and the weak will suffer what they must. And the weak are the ones who scream about a rules-based international order while violating the very rules. So we could talk about a rules-based international order all day long, Chris, but I don't think we have that kind of time today.
No. Chris, many people have called for targeted sanctions on ANC leaders. What needs to happen for that to happen?
Well, actually, nothing needs to happen, Chris. That could be done right now at any time. We have something called the Magnitsky Act, which was put in place because of Russia's actions in the past, which gives the U.S. government the authority to take financial sanctions against foreign leaders who are complicit in human rights abuses, who are complicit in things that take actions against the United States, racketeering, all sorts of things. So the Magnitsky Act is there. President Trump at any time could have imposed it on anybody in South Africa who's in government. Could have done it. He hasn't done it. Now, there are acts in or bills in Congress, in the House and in the Senate. One introduced in the House was introduced in February of 2024 by a Democrat and a Republican, saying that we need to review the strategic relationship with South Africa because it's not going well. South Africa is acting against our interests. Now, that was during the Biden administration. That bill didn't really go anywhere. It still sits in Congress. It hasn't died. This year, or this past year in 2025, a year later, when Republicans and a new Republican president, Ronnie Jackson, who used to be the personal physician of Barack Obama and then Donald Trump, because he was a naval officer, a doctor, a surgeon. He left the military, retired, and ran for office and is a Texas congressman now. He introduced the same bill, but only with Republican backing this time. That bill made it to the floor in August of last year, but it hasn't gone anywhere yet. You see the AGOA bill, or the renewal of AGOA, just was introduced, just came on the floor, and it's already been looked at, whereas this one hasn't been looked at. Then you have in the Senate, you have Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, who has called South Africa our enemy recently. He said, South Africa is our enemy. When talking to Jameson Greer, our trade representative, he said enemy. And he's a very powerful senator from Louisiana and a very vocal and colorful guy too. He introduced a bill, which is very similar, to review the relationship and to sanction the ANC and its leaders. And then we have yet another effort coming because the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, just this past week, the chairman of that committee, Senator Jim Risch of Idaho, said South Africa is our adversary. This is not a good look. There's already a legal mechanism to take action. There are new laws that are in the process. They have to go through, committee. And the one on the review of the relationship in the House has gone through committee and get to the floor. Then they get debated when the Speaker of the House decides to let them be debated. Otherwise, they sit there and they just kind of get rusty. So these things could come at any time. In the meantime, there's already action Trump could do. The things that could be done, well, South African leaders could be blocked from the SWIFT banking system. That would be bad. Suddenly your Visa credit card doesn't work anymore. No more American Express. A little hard to travel around the world just on PayPal, but we can shut that down too. So that's one thing that can be done. There's a lot of things that could be done to South Africa's politicians. Travel bans. It's quite a bit. The United States has been incredibly restrained in this situation, whereas it's been portrayed in the South African media as the U.S. has been aggressive. It's utter nonsense. And why is this? Because officials and fake legacy media in South Africa want to continue to perpetrate the myth that they've created about a white genocide. They're the ones saying white genocide all the time, not Trump. He's only talked about it when he was asked by a reporter, except on one occasion I can recall when he actually addressed it because he'd had enough of it, so he brought the term up. But every other time it's been the media, he's been responding to it. And even in the White House last year, when he was asked the question directly by Annika Larson, asked the question last year, do you still believe there's a white genocide in South Africa? Donald Trump said, I'm not convinced of that. So the media create this, and the South African politicians create it. Look, it's unfortunate that the South African leadership wants to create a crisis with the United States, which has no interest in a crisis with South Africa. It's not that important to the United States. We have other fish to fry, apparently not the least of which are Greenland at the moment. So let's move on.
Chris, meanwhile, the African National Congress is bleeding support. What constellation of parties do you think could replace it?
Oh my gosh, Chris, let me put on my Senior von Rensburg hat here because, man, our Nostradamus hat, because, man, who's going to predict this? Look, I was very bold in November of 2021 within a week of the municipal elections, and I predicted that the national elections that follow the ANC would get between 38 and 42%. And I kind of hit that on the money, didn't I? It was 40%. Now, the truth changed. Some things improved. Load shedding got reduced, and so that helped the ANC. MK came along, that hurt the ANC. But because the facts still kept that range, I predicted that. I have no idea what I'm going to predict for this because you're right. The ANC is shedding support like viral particles, just falling off of them everywhere. It's insane. You know, the ANC went to Pilanesberg and had their 114th birthday celebration. They couldn't attract flies. The stadium was 3/4 empty. They couldn't attract flies. I mean, you could stand them out in the sun and they can't attract flies. It's embarrassing. You know, in the worst of times, in the worst of heat, at a previous stadium, they always have full stadiums. But they either don't have the money to bring suckers in to sit there and suffer in the heat, or the reason they picked it there is because it was remote. There's only one major way in. Whereas Royal Bafokeng Stadium, Northwest, located west of Rustenburg, I've been there for the FIFA World Cup. It's a lovely stadium. Seats about 40,000, if I remember correctly. And it has multiple roads of entry, two from the northwest, from the northeast, from the east out of Rustenburg, from the south, from the motorway. Lots of ways to get in, lots of parking, no traffic jams. But they didn't hold it there. And my suspicion is they held it in Pilanesberg in a remote location because it was a tiny stadium with only 20,000 seats. And they figured, well, we can fill the seats, we won't be embarrassed. But they couldn't fill the seats. So what happens for the next elections? Chris, this is a tough one. They can't draw flies. What are they going to do? Even support in Northwest is beginning to crater. You can see that here. They couldn't even bus people in from Northwest to come. The service delivery, the governance failures, the endless corruption cases, South Africans seem to be waking up. Now, the question is, where do they go? In KZN, a lot of them have gone to MK. But MK is a joke. It's not a real party. It's a vanity project. It's an absolute vanity project. When Jacob Zuma is off the stage, will that party even survive? I mean, his daughter had to withdraw because of the embarrassing mercenary nonsense she was involved in. And every week they fire someone and hire someone else new. You know, who's in charge of that party? It's not a real party. And if they govern, it'll just be more chaos. But I don't think that matters to a lot of voters. They don't see that. They have affinity for Zulu. They have affinity for Zuma, and that's what they see. And also, you know, the illegitimate appropriation of the vaulted, in the eyes of many South Africans, but not in my eyes, of the liberation movement, Umkhonto we Sizwe, the spirit of the nation. People see that and they attach that to the liberation struggle. And so all of that plays in MK's favor. But I don't think MK will do any better than 18 or 20% best case nationwide. That's my expectation. And that'll be driven primarily by KZN and Gauteng, which have the major Zulu populations. But we can't ignore MK. They've won council seats in the Western Cape. That was a bit of a shock for some folks. So we'll see what happens there. The Patriotic Alliance, despite some of the silly things that Gate McKenzie says, seems to be on the rise, particularly in colored communities, but not exclusively. And so they'll do better. The Freedom Front Plus is going to get a lot of people who are leaving the Democratic Alliance. The Democratic Alliance is a dumpster fire that can't be put out. It's an absolute dumpster fire. It's embarrassing. I'm going to get a milk carton and ask where Helen Zilla's at because her presence is missing, in search of, like missing children. We're missing the one true, calm, rational, seasoned voice in all this mess is Helen Zilla. And publicly, she's quiet. Maybe that's necessary to get control of this. But the embarrassment of John Steenhuisen's role as agriculture minister with the spread of foot and mouth disease, virtually no action taken by this government until well over a year afterwards. And arguably, as Athol Trollop said in an interview he just did, I think with Alec Hogue, I think he did an interview, or maybe with somewhere else. He did an interview, and I listened to that, and he talked about, this has really been going on since 2021. And he's correct, it has. But I didn't really spend a lot of time reporting on it. I mentioned the outbreaks that were a little here, a little there. But now we have basically, 2/3 of the nation are under foot and mouth. It's a disaster because it wasn't controlled. It wasn't controlled because they allow people who steal cattle to take them across ground, and they cross and they spread the stuff, and lots of others. And what is the response from the agriculture minister? To blame the farmers. When they begged him for help, in December of 2024. When I asked to interview him in April of 2025, in May of 2025, before it was spread across the nation, he was silent. And the government was largely silent. It was the press that reported on it, but not the agriculture minister. And beyond that, this whole spat with his credit card, a man who is 48 years old, who has no assets to his name. What has he done for 30 years with his assets? What has he accrued? Nothing. He lives off of 2.6 million rand or thereabouts salary, or 2.3 million, whatever it is. That's what's publicly disclosed because he's a minister, not just a member of parliament. And on top of that, the guy can't pay an $8,000 credit card bill. That's insane. He had a court judgment against him. Then the embarrassment of the internal credit card being suspended. Then the Democratic Alliance with yet another internal investigation that begs credibility. Oh, he's not guilty of anything. Well, he's guilty of bringing the party in disrepute because the man can't pay his credit card bill. It wasn't like he missed a payment. They took him to court to get a settlement. This is embarrassing. This is the man that's supposed to be responsible for a party that is fiscally responsible for the country. Look, I'm not trying to attack John Steenhuisen. I'm just saying that the DA is a dumpster fire. This Dion George and Willy Oldkamp, what they did to Emma Powell and Andrew Whitfield and Ronaldo Hus, there's no consistency in this party. It looks to be like an old boys club, except we don't know who the old boys are. And the one resolute, rational, smart, intelligent politician who has the answers in this, who can put her foot down, is busy running for a city council seat and a proportional seat. That's your strongest person. You're going to put on the city council of Joburg, which is a poison chalice. Who wants to control Joburg? It's going to implode. Johannesburg needs to be divided into multiple cities because it can't manage itself. No one shows the ability to manage it. Anyway, so yeah, what party is going to take over? Well, Freedom Front Plus could do a lot better because a lot of people are going to go from the DA to the Freedom Front Plus. The smaller parties may do well, but I don't see a new party on the horizon that's going to come up. So what I expect to happen, and this is the best I can do for prediction after this long discussion about this, Chris, the best I can do for prediction on this, I had to get all that out there just so people come back, well, what about this? What about that? The best I can predict right now is we're going to see hung municipalities across the country, and we're going to see sclerotic governance. We're going to have a mess. You're going to have a situation like you have in KZN at the provincial level where a party with one seat demands all these jobs. If they don't get it, then they cause the government to collapse. And this is a weakness of your so-called democracy in South Africa. And I say so-called because the people don't select the leaders. The parties do. So they have no say whether Ramaphosa is president. That's up to Parliament. They have no say who the provincial legislators. They have no say who the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay is. Because if the people of Nelson Mandela Bay had to say who the mayor is, it would have been Athol Trollip. It would have stayed Athol Trollip. Because under the DA, under Athol Trollip, that city turned around on a dime. The dumpster fire that was Nelson Mandela Bay improved overnight for everybody, black, white, and brown. And the residents knew that. And they supported Athol Trollip. But the EFF stabbed the coalition in the back and caused it collapse. So I expect to see disaster in the governing coalitions around the country. That's what I expect to see as a result of this. It's going to be a mess because it's obvious that most of these politicians, not all, most of them are in it for the things I said most politicians are in it for self-enrichment, self-aggrandizement, and craving political power, not for the people. They're not there for the people. If they're there for the people, this nonsense would stop. You wouldn't have this idiotic stuff going on at Joburg Council we see every time they have a session where people get up and they want to play out their ambitions about Palestine in a municipal council meeting in Johannesburg. Why in the world is that even a topic of discussion? Why are you renaming streets in Johannesburg after a terrorist who killed people and is responsible for the suffering of many people, and you're elevating her? Shouldn't you be focused on electricity, rubbish removal, policing, street repair, water, natural gas? Instead of you having Deep Sloot, that's why we renamed the street Deep Sloot when it blew up. Instead of having nonsense like that happen because of your failed governance, maybe you should focus on governance instead of international politics. So I anticipate that no party will move up. If you ask right now, ANC 20 to 25% nationwide on average. Some places will do a lot better, in the cities, but I'm just saying average 20, 25%. The DA 18 to 22%. The MK party 18 to 20%. EFF 6 to 9% if they're lucky, the way things are going. And the Freedom Front Plus might jump up to about 7 or 8% if they're super lucky, but probably around 5%. And that's a bold prediction, by the way. I don't really have any data to support that. I'm just it's anecdotal. It's tough. There isn't data out there. And then the IFP will probably do a little bit better in KZN, but across the country, they're not going to do much better. And that's kind of what I see. These other parties, these vanity projects like BOSA and Rise Mzansi, they're going nowhere. They're not adding anything. So you're going to have municipalities that are hung, unfortunately. And the DA will lose more municipalities in Western Cape.
Chris, you are in touch with many refugees from South Africa. And when we spoke privately the other day, you pointed out some misconceptions about the program to me. Would you like to repeat that for our viewers, please?
Sure, Chris. We chat every now and then, so I don't recall which ones, but let me cover a few and see if I hit the mark. One of them is that this program, according to Ronald Lamola, he said this on CNN, he said this on other platforms. He claims that the program is open only to Afrikaners, and therefore it's a white supremacy project to replace the population in America. Okay, first off, if anyone thinks that even if all 2.8 million Afrikaners came to America, it was going to change the racial demographics of this country, you really are not good at mathematics and you don't understand population projection. I, on the other hand, have postgraduate work in population and and community and regional development. So I can talk authoritatively to that. Trust me, if every Afrikaner came to South Africa, it wouldn't change where the United States is at. The United States is where it's at because a bunch of old white men in the 1960s decided we should let the rest of the world come in our country. And this is what we have today, right or wrong. So the misconceptions, it's not for Afrikaners. Ronald Mola is lying to the world. The program, as stated since the 10th of February on the U.S. Embassy website, za.usembassy.gov. You don't have to believe me. I'll give you the receipts. Go there. za.usembassy.gov clearly states that the program is for Afrikaners and racial minorities. And there's other qualifications. So racial minorities. And I can also tell you that this nonsense, because Trump mentioned farmers, the farming community and land, they latched onto that. All the media in South Africa and all the wannabe YouTube creators are out there as well. Oh, it's for farmers. It's white. It's racist. Well, it's not for farmers. It's not for Afrikaners. It's not for the people who claim it is. It's for Afrikaners and racial minorities. And I can confirm to you unequivocally with no doubt, because I've interviewed, I've met, I've sat down, I have coffee, I have a dinner with Black South Africans who come in the program. Yes, Black South Africans who come in the program. Interviewed a family who have adopted 2 Black children. And they broke all the lies about the program. The Stoltze family came over here. They're not dirt poor. They're not rich, but they're not dirt poor. So that broke the argument that only toothless, uneducated Afrikaners would come over. They also have one of the family members who has a passport. The husband has a passport from a European country. So he has a safe haven to go to, which means he was ineligible for the refugee program. But the wife was eligible because she met the criteria. And we don't break families up. Therefore, she applied. The family came over. They also have 2 Black children. So Black folks came over. And they have 2 adopted Black children. So the argument that you can't bring adopted children is nonsense. And one of their children is autistic. So the argument the Americans will only take the fit young people that will fix their farms is utter poppycock. So these are some of the myths about the program. And also a myth about the program is that it's all about white supremacy, which is what Ronald Mola is saying. That's the most ludicrous, ridiculous, idiotic thing that anyone could say. But it's all part of a narrative to undermine legitimacy of this. When Ronald Lamola says that, well, you look at the Geneva Conventions, they don't meet the standard of being a refugee. That's absolute nonsense. They do meet the standard of refugee. These refugees under the Immigration Nationality Act, which complies with the international norms for refugee status, meets those standards. These people meet the standard. Past persecution or fear of genuine future persecution. And they meet this standard. And to hear the leaders in South Africa's government continue to lie about this is distressing, because people are turned off from this program. Look, I'm not an advocate for anyone coming over here. A lot of people who don't bother watch my content or read the things that I publish, they see titles or they see this guy that looks like Santa Claus and go, oh, well, he must be a white supremacist. And so he's trying to take all the white farmers out. No, I'm not telling any South Africans to come over here. I'm heartbroken that any South African would want to leave South Africa. Minus the idiotic political nonsense that's going on, it's one of the most amazing places in the world with some of the most amazing people. Afrikaners, Venda, Xhosa, Sotho, the list goes on and on. Amazing people. The Khoi, the San, the colored folks in South Africa. What a great community. It's a shame to see anybody have to feel the need to leave. I'm not advocating for that. I'm also not lying to people. I'm telling the truth about this program. It is not for farmers. It is not for Afrikaners. It's not for white people. Yes, the Trump administration has prioritized Afrikaners. And therefore, many of the people coming over are Afrikaners, but not even half of them that I've seen are Afrikaners. About half of them are other things, mostly white English speakers, but also Indians are here. Coloreds are here, and even some Black South Africans. A Black South African interracial marriage who's been persecuted because of the interracial marriage is coming over, and a couple others are coming over. And I believe a couple are here, but I can't confirm that for sure. So the program is for South Africans, and that's why the government of South Africa wants to mislead the public, because they don't want the world realizing South Africans are leaving. It's easy to say the white racists who brought us apartheid, they're the ones leaving because they're racist. They're going to join the racist Donald Trump. But that's nonsense, utter nonsense. Almost all the people who come to this program, Chris, are younger than ANC governance. Younger, or they were in their 8 or 10 years old. There's almost nobody, only a handful of these people are over the age 50. There are some. There's an 88-year-old Gogo who came over. She's here. The grandmother's over here. That's a refugee. The point here is that most of what the government is saying about this and almost everything the media is saying about it are complete lies. And that's why I continue to interview refugees. I've done about 25 refugee interviews. I have traveled around South Africa last year to talk about this program. That's not without my purpose. I did my meet and greets, but I had 17 or 18 meet and greets, I think it was, and over close to 2,000 people, it was 1,800, 2,000 people come to my meet and greets all over the country, including the big one, Opie Plus in Pretoria, which had about 500 people. So I've done that. Here in the States, I've traveled to Alabama to speak to the Langton family, who are refugees. I've traveled to Idaho to speak to the Hudsenberg families, to speak to refugees. And I've also have a big meet and greet in Texas, which has over 200 South African refugees now. That's on the 31st of January. I'll be traveling there. And then on Monday, I'm traveling to Rochester, New York to investigate some concerns about less than optimal support for refugees, whether it's true or not, who are South Africans. There's a cluster of South Africans up there. So I'll be going there. So there's no journalist on the planet who's gone these lengths to cover the story and cover it objectively. And that's what I've been doing. And I can tell you that it's disheartening to see people dishonest about this program. Just be honest about it. It's like when President Ramaphosa went on Bloomberg at the United Nations General Assembly right after, around the time he became president in 2018, and he told Bloomberg Media, there are no farm murders in South Africa. President Trump's just uninformed. He's misinformed. There are no murders in South Africa. There are no farm murders. No white farmers being murdered. Excuse me, are you serious? Farmers get murdered all over the world. Even occasionally an American farmer gets murdered, in a rural incident, something happens. To make such a claim is utter nonsense when we know that well over 3,000 white South Africans alone, farmers and their family members, have been tortured and murdered on their farms in the past 30 years. So look, it's unfortunate. I don't know. Did I hit on the things we talked about that were misconceptions?
You did. Thank you, Chris. Lastly, how is President Donald Trump going to shock the world next?
You really want me to be Nostradamus now, don't you? Gosh, I'm not sure. When Trump started talking about Greenland, he has a point. Greenland is a place that the United States has been interested in for 150 plus years, and we've tried to get it. But the colonial power, the colonizers, Denmark, don't want to let it go. Oh, yeah, that's right. I said colonial power. They're colonizers. Yeah, Greenland was settled by the Dorset people who became extinct or left it a long time ago. And that was basically unoccupied when the Vikings arrived there from Greenland under Eric the Red. And they had settlements there for hundreds of years, which because of climate change, during the mini ice age, climate change, the conditions weren't suitable. And most of them left or died off. Those who survived went back to Iceland, presumably. We don't really know. And then they were gone. But in the meantime, the Inuit had come over from northern Canada and had come on the island and worked their way down. There was some interaction between them, and the Inuit remain there today. But Denmark took control of this a couple hundred years ago as colonizers, and they remain as a colonizing force. It's funny to see, I'm actually talking about a colonial power here, Denmark, their last colonial outpost almost. But, Trump, what's he going to do? When Trump said he wanted Greenland, there's legitimate reason for it. And the reason is that the Russians and Chinese are serious about, getting in there. And what you and I don't know that the U.S. intelligence community briefs the president on probably could fill volumes about what the Chinese are doing or not doing there and what they said internally that we don't know about. So Trump has a legitimate concern about Greenland. Denmark has failed to provide security there for decades as a NATO member. Their coverage is insufficient. They're not protecting it. And I thought that what Trump was doing with Greenland was to try to force them to do their job and patrol it. And that did happen because when he started talking about it last year, suddenly Greenland said, no. I mean, Denmark said, no. We'll take care of it. And they approved an $890 million military package to buy 3 ships and build a naval base in Greenland to step up their responsibility. But apparently that's not enough for Trump. And now he let the cat out of the bag. Apparently, the American anti-missile protection defense system known as the Golden Dome, kind of taking off of Israel's Iron Dome, is what's in play here. In order to have it be the most effective reach and comprehensive reach for North America, including Canada, Greenland is necessary for emplacement of positions. Now, let's come back to that. The bottom line here is that the United States has an agreement with Denmark that allows us to put military pretty much anywhere in Greenland at our discretion without taxation, without restrictions. So it does raise a question. Well, what's Donald Trump going to do next? When he started last year, I told people that he obviously has a binder in his office. Day 1, do this to irritate the leftists. Day 2, do this to irritate the ACLU. Day 3, do this, take this step. This is the bill we want to introduce. This one. It's clear that they have a playbook. The 4 years that Donald Trump was busy fighting for his legal life in jeopardy when fictitious lawsuits were presented against him, he spent those 4 years very wisely preparing for his next presidency. And they're running off a game plan. People think that he's just off the cuff. He's just doing this. No, I'm pretty confident there's a playbook about what comes next. It's the off-the-cuff things. I think we have one example of that, and that's the recent Iran situation. I don't think they anticipated that the Iranians would rise up after Christmas of 2025 in the streets in the hundreds of thousands, and the government would be paralyzed as to what to do. And so he encouraged them, and they were slaughtered, and we did nothing. And I think his credibility is a little bit at risk on that because of that. But the situation is, I think that's one that caught him a little bit off guard. But Maduro thing, I'm sure that was planned long ago. In fact, Trump didn't want to do it. That's something that's not widely known. Trump did not want to go take Maduro. He hoped to negotiate with Maduro and convince him to go live on a Caribbean island, unmolested. Just go here. We'll leave you alone. You can live with your riches. Just let the people of Venezuela have their voice. And Trump preferred negotiation, which is something that he was involved in the first term, to try to get Venezuela to change tack. Marco Rubio was the hawk, the Secretary of State. Of course, he's a Cuban American, so he has an interest in the Caribbean. And Marco Rubio argued vociferously for us to go do an extradition, do an operation we eventually did in June of last year. Trump said no. But then the actions of Nicolas Maduro got worse and worse. And then the campaign against narco-trafficking, which was stepped up by Venezuela, transshipping these drugs from Latin America, from Colombia through the Caribbean using Venezuelan speedboats and such. Trump had enough, and he said, all right, it's time to do it now. But he was opposed to it. Trump, people think Trump likes to pull the trigger on war, but the guy has worked harder for peace than any president in history, any global leader. And I don't know what he's going to do next. It would be amazing. I think if he negotiates some amazing peace deal, that would be the thing that's interesting. But people forget history, Chris. When Trump was president, the first term, he talked to Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Now, the U.S. approach to Kim Jong-un and his predecessor's father, Kim Jong-il, even Kim Il-sung back in the day. At some point, it gets difficult to remember all the Kims here. but Kim Jong-un, his approach to him was he realized the guy had an ego, and he just wanted his ego stroked. So what the United States did is they agreed to meet with him. And the media like, oh my gosh, he's giving credibility to this leader. Well, I think Bill Clinton did that by giving them oil, keeping them from freezing to death, and giving them billions of dollars worth of food so they wouldn't starve to death. I think that gave credibility to the previous regime back in the 1990s. And Obama did the same thing. And Bush didn't take any serious action. Trump stroked his ego. And what was the outcome? It was exactly what the United States wanted. North Korea stopped firing intercontinental ballistic missiles over the Sea of Japan and over Japanese airspace. Every one of those was an act of war. The Japanese would have been in their rights to attack North Korea based on that. That's an act of war. It's not a missile test. It's an act of war. Those tests stopped. It didn't happen any further. That's what Trump was trying to accomplish. Just by stroking the guy's ego, making him feel like he's important on the world stage. Trump could have attacked North Korea. We could have sent a Delta team in to take out missile silos, to cripple their program, to kidnap their scientists. We didn't do that. We have the capability to do that. We didn't do that. He negotiated with the guy. And the press pillared him and said, oh, look, he's giving attention to dictators. But nobody is saying, well, the ANC is giving attention to dictators. They're coddling with dictators in Tehran. But they are. But they like to say that about Trump. So Trump did that, and that stopped. As soon as he left office, Kim Jong-un abrogated that agreement he reached with Trump informally and began firing missiles over Japanese airspace again. And Biden did nothing. So Trump will surprise you in ways that people can't remember. They've forgotten that. And Trump did that. And this time he claims credit for ending 8 conflicts. That's a bit of a stretch on his part, but he's certainly done more for world peace than anybody in living memory. And they all want to paint him as a warmonger. I don't know what Trump's next move will be. I think it'll be actually something dramatic domestically. The Insurrection Act may be declared in Minneapolis and Minnesota, although it seems to be calming down a little bit now there. But this armed insurrection that's taking place in the streets of Minnesota is unacceptable. Unlike the January 6th, which was a bunch of stupid people walking into a building where the police opened the door, and about 30 people were criminals who broke in on the east side or the west side of the building. That's what that was. But 1,500 people prosecuted as if they were dangerous felons and murderers and terrorists. And we heard it was an insurrection, which it wasn't. This is a real insurrection. These are people that defy the authority of the United States, which is sovereign. And that's what's happened. We have a governor in Minnesota and we have a mayor in Minneapolis who are calling for insurrection. They are saying seditious things against the United States. The fact that they're not in leg irons right now shows great deal of restraint on the part of the Trump administration. They are both legitimately targets for an arrest, a bench warrant for their arrest for their actions. And their own words are what will convict them. They are acting against the interests of the United States, and they're trying to claim that the state is sovereign using Article 10 of the Constitution, or the 10th Amendment, The 10th Amendment doesn't cover this the way they think it does. And so I think that it'll be a dramatic situation in the states rather than international. We'll see the next big thing from Donald Trump. But hey, Chris, every Friday there seems to be a big thing from Trump. So you'll have to have this conversation next week and see what he did.
Indeed. Thank you. That was US intelligence analyst, retired Colonel Chris Wyatt, on the NdB Sunday Show with me, Chris Steyn. Thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome, Chris. Thank you, and have a lovely week.